Welcome to the Nightly 5 podcast with Ben O'Shea.
Munster's there to help with defence. Oh, no! He's done. Oh, that groin's gone.
He's tore it.
Oh, that's terrible.
Oh, no.
Munster is, he can't get off the ground.
It's news that every Origin fan fears, an injury just before the series kick-off. And over the weekend, that news was about Queensland's Origin star, Cam Munster. Here with more is sports editor at The Nightly, Ben McClellan. Ben, what's the bad news on Munster?
Yeah, look, he's aggravated what was an ongoing groin injury, which he's been carrying. As some of our listeners probably know, he had a sort of inadvertent fall in a shower while he was in Fiji, which meant he wasn't able to start the season with the Storm. He then returned, played on the weekend, aggravated his groin, and he pulled up a little lame. And then, Munster, being the workhorse that he is, he then went in for a tackle against the Eels, and then just was writhing in pain, limped off the field. And so they're waiting. We're still waiting on the results of scans to see how serious injury will be. But I'd be surprised if he plays in Origin 1, which is on June 5, and the Origin teams get picked at the end of the next round. So that's Sunday night and Monday night next week. So if you're Billy Slater, obviously he works pretty closely with the Melbourne Storm outside of his job as the Queensland coach. So he'd be he'd have a pretty good line to Cameron, and I guess really putting it to him, whether he thinks he'll be able to play. And the other factor in this is if Munster undergoes surgery, then he's most likely out for a couple of months, and that could potentially put him out for the season. So so there's a lot of factors. A lot of factors in play, as they say. But, and I guess the talk recently has been who would replace Nathan Cleary as halfback for New South Wales, and now we're turning to who will replace Cameron Munster as 5'8" for Queensland.
Yeah, I know. It's fascinating. And someone who might have some ideas about that is our nightly columnist, Spud Carroll, former New South Wales great, rugby league great, who has given his suggestions for potential Origin selections. And what did you take away from his column in the Nightly today?
Yeah. Look, some very interesting insights from Spud. If anyone knows about hitting up the ball and leading with your head, then it's Spud Carroll. So he's made a pretty bold call, as he sort of called it. He wants to see Tom Hazelton in the side. So that's a name a lot of listeners wouldn't be too familiar with. So he's one of the Sharks front rowers. Now, the Sharks are obviously top of the pops at the moment. They beat the Storm last week, weekend before last, and then in Magic Round, they played a great game against the Roosters, and he actually scored the match-winning try. So Spud's saying he would be a great addition to the Blues bench. As you know, in Origin, whether you start in the front row, whether you start on the bench is neither here nor there, because there's obviously quite a high turnover in terms of interchanges, and that's where they mostly get used. So he wants to see Tom Hazelton in the team. He's also saying, despite Joseph Sulai wanting to play rugby next year, he'd like to see him potentially get picked. And he's also calling on Zach Lomax getting a run with the Blues. So Zach, who's leaving the Dragons to go over to the Eels, he's obviously had a stellar season, so he's looking for him to be in the team as well. So some pretty interesting calls. And just on Queensland, he wants to see Ezra Mann come in for Munster.
Yeah, not a bad call. The Tom Hazelton thing, I can't back that as a Queenslander. If there's one thing I hate, it's when the Maroons are getting a bit tired in defence, and then New South Wales brings on some kind of freakish man monster who just hits the ball up so hard as Hazelton does. He's nearly 2 metres tall, weighs 120 kilos. No, that's the last thing I want to see. So I can't back Spud's call on that.
All
but
right, you tell Spud that yourself.
Yeah. Look, I'm about as biased as him, though, I think, in the opposite direction. Fantastic. Not so fantastic for Cam Munster.
No.
We'll wait and see what the news is on that. Thanks, as always, for keeping us up to date on the sports world. Sports editor at The Nightly, Ben McClellan. And that, folks, is today's show. Don't forget to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and join me again tomorrow on The Nightly 5.